Welcome to the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast. My name is Benjamin Lewis. The Curmudgeon Cafe is about preserving history on a personal level, recording stories from regular people like you and me in their own voice. This week, my father, Rob Lewis, interviewed Wayne Beckwith, a retired educator with a passion for traditional farming techniques and horse-drawn vehicles. I hope you'll enjoy this interview with Wayne Beckwith.
So Wayne, there's wagon wheels behind you. Why would that be appropriate for you?
Well, firstly, the name Wayne, I understand, means wagon maker. Now, I am not a wheelwright, so I don't make wheels. I have repaired some, but I don't really make them from scratch. But my interest is mules and going on the wagon train and pulling things around that have wheels similar to what's behind me.
And since you've made wagons, that makes you a Wainwright. In some ways, appropriate.
Yeah, maybe.
So tell me about the wagon train.
Well, the wagon train started, I think, in about 1982, and it's a 4-H wagon train. We think, as far as we know, we're the only 4-H wagon train anywhere, U.S. or otherwise. And it's cool because we have both kids and adults. Usually ended up about half and half. So the adults become student advisors, and the kids are members of 4-H. We, not to the degree that they went on the real Oregon Trail, but we do put people through a bit of stress for the week. We don't even have to plan that usually. We usually something comes up and we problem solve. So that's probably, of anything, that's probably the best learning tool that we have. We have lots of problems that come up, and solutions need to be found. For example, last year we were able to go in the Ochocos, and we had a nice big fire all around us, and they kept saying, "Oh no, it won't jump 26." Well, it jumped 26, and we had to end up leaving a day early because of that. So there was some planning, and last minute Plan B, we stayed a night at the lake because we were concerned about fire. And so we've gone through several things, but it's a good learning thing, and I enjoy it. It's fun to be with the kids. I like to, introduce them to what the mules can do and what it used to be like. And one of the things I think that I would say people really can't be thinking about what they do in their real life. About the second day, nobody even thinks about their email or their cell phone because you're worried about my blisters and this and that, whatever's coming up, now. It's all in the present.
The stress part.
The stress part, and the just being there and making it happen. What am I going to do tomorrow to make whatever work, I mean, they're just, you can imagine what it would have been like, 100 years ago when they didn't have the facilities that we have. I mean, we have porta potties. We have a cook shack that comes along with us, and a wonderful cook, Jerry, that cooks food for us. So we haven't gotten anything close to the stresses. And I try to tell them we try not to reenact everything. We try not to have cholera and run over people and get infection and that kind of thing. So we try not to reenact everything. But we are a working wagon train, and you may get a few blisters and some dirt behind your neck, and the smell of a pioneer before the week is over.
So evidently you don't have showers either.
No, well, there are showers now and then. We have what we call a layover day. So we take a plastic bag, those solar shower things, and we'll hang those up, and you might get a shower once during that time. If, even possible, if you got in early, you might get one set up on a day. But generally speaking, you pretty much got that unique aura about you by the time it's over. And when I come home, I usually shower 2 to 3 times before you feel like, I'm really clean again.
You're getting back down to the surface.
Yeah, first time you kind of get the main part off. Second day, you really scrub on the nails. And although there is one of the chores on wagon train is doing the pots and pans, and I like that job because it's one of the few times on wagon train that my fingernails actually get clean. So
that's how I used to when I would stain when I was an apprentice. That's how I'd clean my hands.
Yeah,
wash dishes.
Washing dishes. Yeah, it's great for hands. Get them halfway clean.
Little history. So, what's your background? What did you do in your adult world?
Well, the majority, I guess, what they look at when they see my resume now, they probably say, well, he was a teacher. And I was a teacher for quite a time period. Started off, as a kid working on the farm and running equipment and tinkering, and just loved to be doing stuff and always wanted to see how things worked. When I was a little kid, they bring in the combines a few days before harvest, and these were pull-type combines. This is a John Deere 36 with 20-foot headers. And I would get in the back of that and crawl all the way through, or as far as I could get, just to see what was in there. So I was always kind of looking and checking it out. So went off to college after high school and thought I maybe would go into agronomy. And that didn't work, and I decided I stayed at the school. I was going to transfer for 2 years, but I ended up staying at the school that I was attending, which was in Idaho, Northwest Nazarene College. And the best thing I got out of that is I met my wife, and she'd been my wife for 47 years. But anyway, I became a social studies teacher and certified and all that, and then went off to do other things. First thing, we went into the Peace Corps and spent 2 years in India, my wife and I. And then came back, worked in a boys' home in Seattle for a year, mostly disturbed boys. That was an experience. We had at one time thought we wanted to have a little boys' home of our own, and that got it out of our system. And then I went on, we went to Spokane. I worked for a Rendell Tractor and sold heavy-duty equipment and logging equipment up around Pierce, Idaho, and places like that, running around in the woods in the wintertime. And let's see, then I decided, I like the teaching aspect, but social studies was fine, but I was always a tinkerer. And I thought, I want to do something fun while I'm teaching, something I'm excited, because I found that my teachers, the ones who were really excited about what they were doing, they were the best teachers. So I wanted to do what I was excited about. So I went back to school and got my master's degree at Eastern Washington University and became an industrial ed teacher. And ended up in Pilot Rock, which is just out of Pendleton, Oregon, for 4 years, taught their metals program there. The guy before me had designed and ordered all the stuff for this new metal shop, and the community supported it and bought all the materials, and then he left. And so they hired me, and they said, well, you can come 2 weeks early, because you'll have time to get things going. Well, after about the first 3 or 4 days, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get this done in 2 weeks. So I felt a little bad, but the first things we did is I put the kids to work. We built benches and put things together, and I found out later, actually reading one of my journals, that they did a study showing kids that were in that kind of a program where they were building a program as versus those that were kind of doing the little project and crunching it out. The ones who actually were building their program ended up learning more than the others. So I didn't feel so bad after that. And there was also a little advantage. I remember one of my kids, his name was Larry Lemons. He was my aide when he was a senior. And he was in there, and a freshman was there, and I was doing something the other side, and I heard this tap, tap, and then I heard Larry say, hey, don't mess with that. I built that bench. So there was a real buy-in, and there was an advantage that I hadn't thought of. But I had a good time at Pilot Rock. But my wife's family is from the valley here, and my family was from Spokane, so we were right in the middle, 200 miles from any family. So we decided we got to go one way or the other. She had more family. She's from a family of 11 kids. So we came to the Dayton area and lived right down the road from grandparents. Our kids grew up there. We've been there for, 35 or so years now. We ended up buying property there and building a house. The kids and I built the house we live in.
At this point in the program, I'd like to take a short break to let you know a little bit about how you can help support the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast. The biggest way to show your support is to share the podcast with others, or leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Whichever podcast service or social media network you're on, let it be known that you're listening to the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast and that it's worth listening to. Thank you for your support. Now back to our interview with Rita, where she's about to make a move that will change her life.
Okay, I'm going to back you up just a little bit.
Yeah.
When you talked about your Pilot Rock.
Yeah, Pilot Rock.
The other day, you talked about a foundry, a guy in Pendleton.
Yeah. A place called Hoosier Machine Shop in downtown Pendleton. I used to take my students from the metals program there in Pilot Rock. I'd take them in as a field trip because it was such a unique little place, and I was just, it was fun for me to see a guy who decided, you know, I'm going to make a business. I'm going to do it from the bottom up and do it all. I mean, he did his own castings, he did his own machining, he did his own welding, he actually did his own printing of his brochures, you know, and he sold basically conversion kits. At the time, Jeep didn't make a decent motor, so everybody wanted to put a Chiv or a Ford or something like that in them. So he made conversion kits, and they went all over the world. And I'd take my kids in there and see kind of a piece together. You know, it wasn't a fancy place. And most of the equipment, even his casting equipment, he made on his own. But it worked. And he had a good quality product and a good name. And it was fun for kids, I thought, to see that. Because, you know, they think everything has to come from a big corporation. And that's not necessarily true. If you pick out a niche and do a good job and take care of your customers like he was doing, he had a good business. So, yeah, that was a good experience. The program there at Pilot Rock, I was there for 4 years. You know, after I got the thing going and we got the foundry going and everything, I think I told you the other day, my first casting, aluminum casting, was just a piece of junk. I mean, holes in it and, you know, cold shorts here and there and everything. I mean, it was really bad. So I took it home that night, got an old picture frame and some red velvet and made a nice little sign at the bottom, a little inscription on the bottom of it. It said, "From this beginning, the only place is up." And the kids thought I was crazy, but after a while they began to understand. We got pretty good at being able to cast things. We actually ended up casting stuff for people in town at the community college for their program, and in a business we made some little anvils as a promotional thing. So, you know, adding that, I was telling somebody the other day, adding that component to classes. I think hands-on stuff is great, but if it's hands-on stuff that goes in the ash can or, you know, doesn't really have a use, it's not as valuable. If it's something, you know, something they can take home and like that, that's great. But if you add the component of somebody else, in other words, a kind of a commercial side, you say, okay, this is going to go to the customer. Here are the specs. It either makes the specs or it goes in the garbage and we start over. And boy, I just saw the quality and the work ethic and everything just come way up when all of a sudden it made a difference. And I learned that there and ended up doing it in my drafting class. I had a friend who was working for General Dynamics at the time, and they wanted a model of a heat exchanger. So in my drafting classes, I said, okay, we'll make it for you. And we got the money to put into the program. So I had him send the drawings. Well, he sent the drawings, and I had my kids study the drawings, you know, so that they would understand how this thing was put together. And we made models out of plastic. And then they used it, their salesman actually used those models then for selling these heat exchangers. And it was a great thing because, again, it had to be right. If it wasn't right, it didn't make it. So, and it just added so much to it. And I kind of learned that if you add that component, it makes a big difference with somebody who's learning. So that was my Pilot Rock. And eventually, you know, like I said, 200 miles from any family, we decided to come to the valley. And so we came over there, and I ended up eventually, after a time of doing property management, I was a domestic water pump installer on my own for a while. Several things, hobby, doing this and that. And then the fellow who was the head of vocational education in Oregon had known me from Pilot Rock. And he called me up and said, Wayne, they lost their teacher at North Salem High School. This is 2 weeks into the school year, first part of the year. Would you be willing to go apply? And I thought about it for a while. I said, okay, fine, I guess I will. I mean, I wasn't really looking for education, but I said, okay, I will. Anyway, I ended up getting the job, and I did the orientation, and I was supposed to come on Wednesday. And Wednesday through Friday was supposed to be observe the teacher that was there. Well, they had a sub in there. And so I walked into the classroom, and the sub looked at me and said, "Are you the new teacher?" And I said, "Yeah." He turned around and walked through the door, and I never saw him again. So for 20 years, I was at Pilot Rock, at North Salem as a teacher there. So it was a good program. I enjoyed that. They didn't have a foundry, but I put one kind of makeshift, got some stuff and put a foundry in there too, so we had sheet metal and machining and welding. So while I was at North Salem, they instituted the senior project as kind of a trial. It wasn't required by the other schools in Salem District, but at North Salem we decided to do it. And so you didn't have to do it, but kids were encouraged to do it. And one of my students wanted to do a senior project, and he wanted to be able to rebuild some kind of a tractor. Well, at the time I had an old Clee track, and it needed rebuild. And so I found out that his family had most of, or the running gear of a wagon. And so I got to talking to him, and he talked to Grandma and everybody, and they decided, yeah, that'd be fine. So I traded him that old Clee track for the undercarriage for my wagon, and one of the wheels was rotted and bad, and I got that done. Actually, Everett Metzentine ended up fixing that for me. So I got the undercarriage. Then after I had that one wheel fixed, it sat forever, a long time, and I'd borrowed wagons for wagon train for a long time, and then finally I rebuilt, put new pieces in it and built the box, and then that's how I got my wagon. It has a little casting. One of the castings on it says September 11th, 1883. So it's getting 125 plus now.
Wow.
So the parts of it are pretty old, but I enjoyed it because it was a wagon. I guess they purchased it in Woodburn. It was from the Kennedy family. They ended up going down by Corvallis. And there's a road down there called the Kennedy Road. It was named from their family. The brother of the grandmother said that he was the one who purchased it, and it was used here in the valley. It didn't come over the Oregon Trail. The wheels, the tires were so badly, so used that they had a lot of concave shape to them. So when I was going to put a new tire on, I thought, well, I'll just pull those off. Well, they were so bad that you couldn't do it because to get it back on, that outside edge is too small, So I would have had to make all new tires. So I just cut the tire, welded angle iron on, and put some all thread on there, sucked it back together, and welded it again. So that worked, except my back wheels have a little bit of a pulse in the brake now because of that. Because you come to that, it's just a little different right now. One spot. You have to kind of get used to that. There's a little pulsating in the brake pedal.
They said that about upset wheels, though, too, where people would have their wheels upset.
Oh, the same thing happened?
And it would bump out a little bit on the brake, and it would pulse.
Yeah, okay. Well, then it's not uncommon, yeah. No. Yeah. So, but since then I've, used my wagon on wagon train. That's mostly what I use it for. Once in a while, I'll parade, but mostly if I'm going on a road trip or something, I generally don't use it. I use my rubber-tired wagon, but anything authentic, I like to use that with the kids, Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears back to school stuff.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk about kinesthetic learning.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to explain, or maybe you don't even want to, why do you see that as an important way to learn?
Well, I think, as far as the modern philosophy, I think everybody realizes that if you use more than one sense, you have a better chance of picking it up. If you can taste it, hear it, touch it, see it, it's better than just reading about it. And so I think you can add, that's kind of the bottom line. You're going to retain something if you've actually got to handle it. If a kid says, oh yeah, I read about a milling machine, well, that's great. He kind of got, okay, it looks like it makes different parts and stuff. But if you actually get on a milling machine and make a groove in something, or, clean up casting or something, you get a concept of what that's about. Now, whether or not that translated into a job, for some kids it did. I had a kid at my program in North Salem. We did a little bit of CNC work. There was one little milling machine set on a table that we rotated through all the 5 schools, high schools, and you'd have it for a month, and then you had these little program boxes, and I made the kids sit down with graph paper, and at that time, you couldn't just type in A and it would make an A. You had to figure out the angle. It was very, very meticulous, hard work to make the programming. But from that little bit of a program, experience. I had a kid walk out of there, and he went to Lynn Gear because they were looking for somebody that would do it, doing programming and CNC work. He got a job there, and last I heard, he was a supervisor for HP in a clean room and ran the whole thing. He got a good job because of that. Not every kid went into that, but I didn't feel bad about that, because to me, like I told one of my principals once, she was involved in kind of seeing that some of the programs be discontinued, and I said to her, does your husband have a punch or a little toolbox or something he made in junior high or high school? Yeah, we got this dumb little pile of stuff. Every time we move, he's got to take it with him. I said, why do you think that is? She didn't know. I said, well, I think it has something to do with self-satisfaction, and I did that. I don't have to be a machinist or a welder just because I did that, but you have that sense that I could do something if I needed to, and I did that. And I think there's something about that as humans we really need that in a society, particularly now where there are very few things you can work on and tinker with. I mean, not many people tinker with their cars these days. So to have some skills to feel like I could do that, and maybe even venture out and try it. That's another aspect that I think is important. I mean, I just think self-worth and self-satisfaction, maybe if it's just a hobby. Hobbies are important. For me right now, hobby is a big deal. I mean, that's what I do.
So what is your hobby?
Well, let's see. You have to narrow down.
Pick two of your favorites.
Yeah. Most recently, well, my father-in-law just passed away, and there was a lot of stuff on his place. He lived to be almost 95, 17 days less of 95, and he liked to collect things. And so from that collection, I have got several pieces. Like one thing was these boxes that they used to do split rims so that they wouldn't kill somebody. They'd slip the tire in there and put the air pressure in them. Well, come to find out, this was made out of solid, square bar stock, about 1.5 inches thick, and I ended up welding that up into a table and made, that was kind of the centerpiece. And then I have a forge and other things, a little sheet metal brake, and everything put into this new addition to my shop, because I built a little lean-to and made a metal shop out of it. So that is one thing I like. I like to tinker with metal stuff. I've kind of always been involved in that. I get, the wagon stuff. Right now I'm building a two-wheel cart.
For a second. So you said little brake?
well, it's an 8-foot sheet metal brake.
That's not little. Okay, I think you need to stop it.
Well, no, that's a 2-minute warning.
Okay. 2-minute warning. Okay.
Yeah.
So then your other hobby.
My other hobby, I think it's the mule thing. I'm pretty involved in mules. I enjoy, along with mostly for me it's driving. I mean, I do ride them occasionally, but I enjoy the driving part. If somebody says they need a wagon or need rides or something, like my wife says, it doesn't take much to get me excited to say yes. If they go caroling or go through a parade or whatever, I'm excited to do it. And especially, I think, because of my background up on the farm, I like to mix that mule and horse-drawn kind of thing with doing the farm stuff. So just last night, one of my friends called me about, he thinks he's got a line on a header box from Eastern Oregon. And I've been wanting to for a long time. I want to put 4 mules on it and push a header box, and because we do a harvesting thing in McMinnville. Even though in the valley they didn't use that, it would be fun for people to see.
If you've enjoyed Wayne's stories of roughing it on the 4-H wagon train, you should probably head on over to audibletrial.com/curmudgeon, where you can sign up for a free trial of Audible and download 1 free audiobook. Today I'm recommending Roughing It by Mark Twain, in which he tells the story of his time as a silver miner in Nevada, working at a Virginia City newspaper, being down and out in San Francisco, and reporting for a newspaper from Hawaii. With over 150,000 audiobooks to choose from, Audible is sure to have something that'll spark your interest. Visit audibletrial.com/curmudgeon for your free trial. Now back to our interview.
So, I mean, I enjoy restoring old stuff, not just restoring it and putting it in a museum. I want to then pull it around with mules. I mean, to me, that's the frosting on the cake. Yeah, it's great to have pieces in a museum, but, if it's just going to sit there, it's good and for history and all, but I like to get it out and show I think when we get out and do things like at the museum or any public kind of venue, to me, there's two groups that I really, really enjoy. I mean, everybody's fun to be with, but the two groups that stand out for me are the old people who will come up to you and say, we had some mules, and tell you some story, which is really cool. And then the kids. They don't have a clue what you're doing. And, last fall, they wanted me to come in and plow the garden at the museum for the kids. And okay, that's why I took a couple mules in there and a little plow, and we were plowing along. Well, and the kids, I made one round, and there's a bunch of worms. They all went crazy about the worms. They'd never seen worms. They were from Beaverton or something. I don't think they'd ever been in the dirt, So I think it's worthwhile for people to see, for kids to see, and of course it's fun for me to talk and meet with older people that have had a similar experience, or at least it brings something up for them, That's really fun. I enjoy that. When we go out and plow, say at the plowing match, I mean, we could plow the field in, a little time, but it takes a long time to do the PR, We have to stop at the end of the row and do a little PR.
Well, talk a little bit about the plow match and the museum down there. You keep mentioning
the museum is the Yamhill County Museum, and it's the Heritage Center, which is out on Durham Lane off of Highway 18 on the way to the coast out of McMinnville. We, a few years ago, they had been, when they first started, they used tractors, antique tractors, and there was a club there, and they enjoyed plowing. And one year we had a horribly wet spring, and they knew I had the mules, and for some reason I was there. I think I had done something with the mules with the kids. Anyway, they said, well, can you guys plow? And I said, well, yeah, we can plow with water in the furrow if you want, And they said, well, can you get a couple of buddies and come and plow? Because we can't plow this year. And I said, okay. So I got a couple of teams. I think it was Dwayne Van Dyke and Neil and I. We just had 3 teams there, and we plowed for them. And the crowd thought it was cool,
Oh, yeah.
And they loved it. And, I mean, it's a little bit, I know the guys that have their tractors, I mean, they're cool, and some people really enjoy those. But it's a little bit like I do a pumpkin patch thing out in Grand Island for a guy named John Heiser and the Heiser Pumpkin Patch. And at the end, I give rides out to the pumpkin patch and back with the mules and the wagon, and we come up, and the people always want to pet the mules and take pictures. And I told John, I said, I've never seen anybody come up after they got their ride on the tractor and want to pet the tractor or take their picture in front of. What's that about? Yeah, I know. But that's kind of the way it was for them too. They got excited about it. So now, last year we had the biggest turnout in the Northwest of any function, like a plow match. We had 22 teams plowing last year, and we expect to have a group about that size again this year. And this year it's April 11th. And so we plow it up. And then last year, like in the past, we used to spend the second day and work the ground and get ready to seed. And it depends on the weather. Sometimes it's pouring down rain, so you can't do that. So we haven't done that. We haven't planned it. But if it's nice, like this year again, if it's nice, we'll come the second day. It's not really publicized, not as big a public thing, but we just come out there and, do other things, pull the disc. Like last year, Neil and Larry bought this 3-bottom 8-inch, three 8-inch, so it covers 24 inches. And I hooked up 4 mules to that and did that on the second day, just something different, and then we got out the disc and the harrow and stuff like that. But to use that farm equipment that I was talking about restoring, last year, another friend of mine, Elmer Schrader, had a cart, a harrow cart, which is really cool. When it, as you go around the corner, it articulates and follows around. It's, all mechanical and really kind of cool to see. So I cleaned that all up, and he actually got it powder coated, which I disagreed with. But anyway, he powder coated it, and then we used that, the harrow, pulling the harrow around. But it was using the equipment, which I enjoyed, and I think now the museum, we're kind of it. I mean, they really enjoy us. I think we had over 3,000 people there last year on the plowing match, and it's a good thing for them. They bring in people, and then they open up the rest of the museum. People get to see the tractors and all that. And then once it's seeded, then we'll harvest in August. So we have what we call, Harvest Fest. So it's Farm Fest and Harvest Fest. And Harvest Fest, I pull a binder with 3 mules, and Neil, usually pulls a bundle wagon or something like that. And there's one fellow has a stationary baler where the mules go round and around and bale the straw. And I'm hoping to get some other equipment. There's a there's an outfit up in Davenport, Washington that last year used, I think they had 8 mules on a 14-foot pull-type combine, an old wooden Harris.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to hope to go up there this year and see that. It would be fun to pull a combine. There is a fellow there in McMinnville that has a John Deere. I think it's a 14-foot cut or 16. And he's had trouble keeping it running. And I keep kidding him. And I say, if you can get that to run for more than 100 feet, we'll hook onto it. And we intended to do it last year, but again, he had trouble with it. So we were going to wait. Our thing is Monday or Saturday and Sunday, so I was going to wait till Monday and just do this because it was the first time doing it. And I was a little, we want to make sure everything goes right. You don't want to spread it over 3 acres with the public there. So but he didn't get it running long enough to make it work. But someday I hope to be able to pull a combine. You see the pictures of the Palouse country where you got 28 and 33 head of mules on a combine, and it's amazing, to see. And the thing about it, some of this stuff, you see pictures and you read about it, and then when you actually get to doing it, kind of back to that hands-on thing, there's some stuff missing there in the pictures and in the written stuff. Like when Larry, my friend Larry made that coach. He had a great book, and he had some good people that knew some stuff. But then there was always that, what do we do here? Because, it was like some of that stuff, I think it was so common knowledge that nobody wrote it down. I mean, who writes down how to turn the ignition switch on your car? Nobody writes it down. Well, in 100 years, they probably need to know that. But there was stuff like that was so common that it wasn't written down and it wasn't recorded, and now we have to kind of reinvent it. So, that's fun. One of the problems is most of the people say, I'm a hobby farmer, and this is a hobby for me. I don't do it every day. And the guys that did it every day are mostly dead. Now there's a young generation that are doing the CSAs and some of the organic farming and stuff, which I applaud and would love to do if I had enough energy. But other than that, the experts have gone. So people look to me, which is kind of scary, for the information because, I've been doing this for, I have one mule that's 30 years old, so I guess I've been with mules for 30 years. Her brother was around too, so 31 years I've been doing this. But, I'm not an expert. I hope to keep learning.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast. Next week we'll be interviewing Larry Hiskett, a traveling performer that goes by the name Washboard Willie. I hope you'll take a moment to review the show on iTunes and Stitcher, as well as share the show with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're feeling especially generous, we do have a Patreon set up at patreon.com/curmudgeoncafe, where you can pledge money for every episode released. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next week.